There are some things you don't forget, not because they were loud, because they were quiet in a way that made the air feel wrong. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of morning that comes to Winnipeg like an apology: gray sky, frost on the parked cars, the smell of diesel, and Tim Hortons in the parkade. Evelyn Marsh arrived at the Radisson on Portage Avenue at 7:12 a.m. She was 51 years old, traveling alone, wearing a navy blue puffer jacket over dark slacks and sensible shoes. She had a carry-on rolling behind her and a tote bag on one shoulder. She was not in a hurry. She had learned long ago that the people who move the slowest through a room are often the ones who see it most clearly. The lobby was doing its morning shuffle. A family was checking out near the elevator bank, their luggage stacked like a small fortress. Two men in suits crossed toward the restaurant without looking up from their phones. A bellhop in his 20s moved a cart of bags near the side entrance. None of them looked at Evelyn, not once. She walked to the front desk. There were two agents on duty. One, a young woman with auburn hair and a practiced smile, was finishing up with the family. The other was a man in his mid-30s. His name tag said Hartwell. He had the particular posture of a person who decides things. Shoulders back, chin slightly elevated. The kind of posture that costs nothing to maintain as long as no one questions it. He looked at Evelyn. Then he looked past her, toward the entrance, as though expecting someone more interesting to walk through. Evelyn waited. She did not fidget. She did not clear her throat. She simply stood at the counter with both hands resting lightly on her tote bag and waited for the man to do his job. He took 11 seconds. I know that sounds like nothing. But stand at a counter sometime and count to 11 while someone looks through you and see how it feels. "Can I help you?" Hartwell finally said. The U landed at the end of the sentence with a particular weight. "I'd like to check in," Evelyn said. "Reservation under Marsh." He typed something. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. A small recalibration. The way a person looks when they find something unexpected and are deciding whether to acknowledge it. "The Waterfront Suite?" he said. "That's right." Another pause. That suite is typically reserved for corporate accounts, or... "I'm aware of that," Evelyn said. She did not raise her voice. She did not lean forward. She said it the way you say something when you have said it before, in other lobbies, in other cities, on other gray mornings, and you are tired of explaining yourself to people who already have the answer on their screen. Hartwell looked at her for a moment longer than necessary. Then he said, "I'll need to verify the booking." "Of course," Evelyn said. He picked up the desk phone. He did not dial immediately. He set it down again, picked up a pen, set it down. Evelyn watched all of this without expression. "Is there a problem with the system?" she asked. No. Just standard procedure." She nodded once and said nothing more. A woman appeared from the back office, mid-40s, dark blazer, hair pulled back. Her name tag said Renata, Guest Services Manager. She moved with the calm efficiency of someone who had spent years putting out small fires before they became visible to guests. She glanced at the screen, then at Evelyn, then at Hartwell. "Good morning," Renata said, addressing Evelyn directly. "Are you Ms. Marsh?" "I am." "Welcome back to the Radisson, Ms. Marsh. I see you're joining us for the Regional Leadership Summit this week. We have everything ready for you." She looked at Hartwell. "Mr. Hartwell can complete the check-in." The word "back" hung in the air for a moment. Evelyn had stayed at this hotel twice before. It was in the system. It had been in the system the entire time Hartwell was standing there deciding whether to verify her booking. Hartwell processed the paperwork without another word. He slid the key cards across the counter in a small envelope. Evelyn picked them up, thanked Renata, and walked toward the elevator. She did not look back. "What I want to tell you before we go any further is this. Evelyn Marsh did not arrive at that hotel looking for a confrontation. She was not carrying a grudge or a chip on her shoulder, or any of the other things people assume when a black woman refuses to be made small. She was tired. She had flown in from Halifax the night before, slept 4 hours in a transit hotel near the airport, and was now at a conference she had been invited to Keynote. She had been invited to Keynote because for 23 years she had been a Crown prosecutor in Nova Scotia. She had tried over 200 cases, She had argued before the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal 17 times. 4 of those arguments had set precedent. She had retired from prosecution 3 years ago and had since been consulting with provincial justice departments across the country on systemic reform. Which is Evelyn's way of saying that people with very serious problems called Evelyn Marsh when they needed someone who knew how the machine worked and wasn't afraid to say so in a room full of people who built it. She was not a woman who announced herself. She had spent a career in courtrooms where announcing yourself too early was how you lost. She had learned to let other people talk, to take notes, to wait. She was very, very good at waiting. The summit ran Tuesday through Thursday. It was a gathering of justice sector professionals, policy advisors, municipal leaders, and community advocates from across the Prairie provinces. About 240 people in total. The hotel had a conference floor on the 3rd level, a series of meeting rooms and a large ballroom that smelled of carpet cleaner and fresh coffee. Evelyn's keynote was Wednesday morning. She had the afternoon on Tuesday to settle in, review her notes, and walk the neighborhood. She came down to the hotel restaurant at noon. She was wearing the same jacket, her hair natural, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She sat at a corner table by the window and ordered coffee and a bowl of soup and opened her notebook. She was mid-sentence in her notes when the man sat down across from her. She looked up. He was perhaps 45. Sandy hair going gray at the temples, a lanyard around his neck from some other conference. Pharmaceutical, from the look of the logo. A loosened tie and the general air of someone who has been on the road for 3 days and finds himself charming. His name, she would later learn, was Stanton. "Mind if I join you?" he said, already seated. Evelyn looked at him for a moment. "I do, actually," she said. "I'm working." He laughed, not unkindly, but with the particular bewilderment of someone who has never been told no by someone who looked like Evelyn. "Come on," he said. "It's a big empty restaurant. There are 14 other tables," Evelyn said. She said it the way she said things in a courtroom. Measured, precise. Here are the facts. The facts are not in dispute. Stanton blinked. Then he picked up his coffee and moved. She went back to her notes. A young woman at the next table, perhaps 26, with braids and a conference lanyard that matched Evelyn's, leaned slightly toward her after he left. "That was impressive," she said quietly. Evelyn smiled without looking up. "Just counting tables," she said. Tuesday evening, there was a welcome reception in the ballroom. White tablecloths, a cash bar, the low, warm noise of professional small talk. Evelyn moved through the room with a glass of sparkling water, stopping to speak with a policy advisor from Saskatoon she had worked with years ago, an Indigenous community leader from Thompson, who had read one of her papers, and a retired judge from Regina who called her by her first name and meant it warmly. At a certain point, she found herself near the edge of the room, by the tall windows that looked out at the city lights on the river. A man appeared beside her, heavyset, late 50s, a red face that could have come from cold or from something he drank. He was wearing a city councillor's lanyard. His name tag said Boyce. He looked out the window, then looked at her. "You with the catering," he said. Evelyn turned and looked at him fully. She took her time. She looked at her own lanyard, which said Keynote speaker in a slightly larger font than the other attendees. She looked back at Boyce. "No," she said. He squinted at her lanyard. Something moved across his face, not quite embarrassment, not quite recognition, the midpoint between the two, where some people get defensive and some people get quiet. Boyce got loud. "Well, how was I supposed to know?" he said, though no one had asked him to explain himself. "Half these people are milling around, could be anyone." "You could have read my name tag," Evelyn said. "I'm just saying I know what you're saying," she said. "Excuse me." She moved away, not quickly, not flustered, the way you move when you have somewhere else to be, and the current conversation is no longer the most interesting thing in the room. She did not report the exchange. She did not seek out the event organizer. She picked up a second sparkling water and went to find the woman from Thompson, who had a wonderful laugh and was telling a story about a community meeting that had gone sideways in an instructive way. But 3 people had heard the exchange with Boyce. 2 of them would remember it. One of them had a very clear conscience and a low tolerance for exactly this kind of thing. Her name was Philippa Souza. She was a retired schoolteacher turned community advocate from Thunder Bay, and she had been attending this summit for 6 consecutive years. She had met Evelyn once before briefly at a conference in Ottawa 5 years ago. She remembered her. Philippa found the event coordinator that evening and described what she had witnessed in the calm, detailed manner of someone who once taught 32 10-year-olds at once and learned early that specificity is the difference between being taken seriously and being managed. Wednesday morning, Evelyn came down to the lobby at 8:15. She was wearing a dark gray blazer over a white shirt, small gold earrings, natural hair. She looked like what she was, a person about to speak to 240 professionals about systemic reform in the justice sector. She stopped at the desk to ask about a printout she had sent to the business center the night before. Hartwell was there again. "Last name Marsh," she said. "There should be a print job from last night." He looked at the screen. "I don't see anything under that name." It was sent to Business Center at the hotel email, around 10:15 p.m. "We don't have a record of that." She waited. "Is it possible you sent it to the wrong address?" he said. "No," she said. He gave a small shrug, the particular shrug of a person who has decided the problem belongs to you. Evelyn took out her phone. She opened her sent mail. She turned the screen toward him without comment. He looked at the screen. The email was there. The timestamp was 10:17 p.m. The recipient was exactly the address he had just suggested she might have gotten wrong. "I'll check with the business center," he said. "Thank you," she said. She waited by the desk, not impatiently, not with folded arms. She stood the way she stood in courtrooms during recesses, still, present, reading the room. The printout appeared in 2 minutes. It had been there all along, filed under a different tab in the business center system, printed and waiting in a tray. Hartwell handed it to her without an apology. She took it. She said, "Thank you," again, meaning it at exactly the same level as the first time. No more, no less. She walked to the elevator. The keynote was at 9 a.m. The ballroom was full. The moderator, a woman named Dr. Osi from the University of Manitoba, introduced Evelyn with care, reading her career chronology in a way that made the room settle into a different kind of quiet. 23 years of prosecution, 102 jury trials, Crown Counsel for Nova Scotia at 31, Provincial Law Reform Commission at 44, now consulting, now teaching, now here. Evelyn walked to the podium. She looked at the room for a moment without speaking. It was a thing she did. Let the room come to her. Then she said, "I want to start with something small." She talked about a morning in 1999. She was a junior Crown, 2 years out of Dalhousie law. She had walked into a courtroom in Halifax and a bailiff had asked her if she was lost. She had said, "No, I'm counsel." He had looked at her file folders and said, "The Crown's office is down the hall, dear." She was the Crown. She was standing in the courtroom where she was scheduled to speak in 8 minutes. She told it without anger. She told it the way you tell a story you have made peace with, which is different from telling a story you have forgotten. She said, "I've thought about that moment for 25 years, not because it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It wasn't, not even close. I've thought about it because of the 12 people in the gallery who heard him say it, and not one of them said a word. The room was completely still. Silence," she said, "is not neutral. It is a choice, and choices compound. The bailiff was wrong in a moment. The 12 people chose to be wrong for the next 25 years, because they still don't know it cost anything." She spoke for 42 minutes. She talked about what silence does inside institutions, about the cost of turning away, about the difference between a system that makes mistakes and a system that has decided certain mistakes don't count. She was not angry. She was exact, the way a surgeon is exact, not because they don't feel anything, but because precision is the form their care takes. At the end, she said, "I've been asked what keeps me doing this work, and the honest answer is, I keep meeting the 12 people, and every once in a while, I meet the one person who decided not to be one of them." In the audience that morning, without Evelyn's knowledge, was City Councillor Boyce. He had been scheduled to attend the Tuesday evening session only. He had come back Wednesday morning. For reasons he would later struggle to articulate, even to himself, He sat in the third row. He listened. He also sat 3 seats from Philippa Souza, who had submitted a formal written account of Tuesday evening's exchange to the summit organizing committee the night before, attaching her own name to it without hesitation. After the keynote, there was a break. Coffee and pastries in the corridor outside the ballroom. Boyce found Evelyn near the coffee station. "Miss Marsh," he said. She looked at him. "I owe you an apology," he said. "What I said last night. There was no excuse for it." She looked at him for a moment, not testing him, just reading, the way she always read, calmly, without urgency. "I appreciate that," she said. "I've been to a lot of these summits," he said. "I've been in that room a lot of years. I don't think I've ever—" He stopped, seemed to decide against finishing the sentence the way he'd started it. "What you said up there, about the 12 people, I was one of them this morning. When you said it, I knew it." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "That's not a comfortable thing to know." "No," he said. "Good," she said. Not unkindly, exactly the right amount. Later that day, Thursday afternoon, the final session of the summit, the organizing committee made a brief statement at the closing plenary. They noted that an incident of discriminatory conduct had been reported and addressed through the summit's formal process. They did not name names. They did not have to. After the closing session, Hartwell's manager, the hotel's general manager, a careful woman named Gail Tremblay, called him into her office. There had been 2 complaints filed through the summit's committee, both referencing the front desk interactions on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings. There were also notes from Renata's file, who had documented Tuesday's check-in without comment at the time, as she always did, because documentation was part of doing the job well. Hartwell said the interactions had been standard procedure. Gail Tremblay said, "Our standard procedure is the same for every guest." She placed him on a formal performance review. There would be retraining. There would be a documented record. Whether that record became something more depended on him. He left her office looking like a man who had believed for a long time that he lived in a world without receipts and had just learned differently. On Thursday evening, Evelyn packed her carry-on in the Waterfront Suite and stood for a moment at the window. The river was dark, and the city was lit the way prairie cities are lit at night. Flat and wide and honest about the distance between things. She was flying back to Halifax in the morning. She thought about the young woman in the restaurant on Tuesday, just counting tables. She thought about Philippa, who had gone and found the right person and said the thing that needed to be said, clearly and with her own name attached to it. She thought about Boyce, standing by the coffee station, finding it uncomfortable to know what he knew. She thought that was the right place to start. She did not think about Hartwell. Some people you carry forward, and some people you leave in rooms. She picked up her tote bag and her notebook and went downstairs to the restaurant for one last meal before her early flight. She sat by the window. She ordered the wild rice soup and a coffee. She opened her notebook. She wrote, "The 12 people are always in the room. The question is which one you decide to be. I've been thinking about what Evelyn said, not the speech, though that stays with you. The quiet part, the part about silence being a choice. Most of us will never be in a courtroom. Most of us will never keynote a conference or have our careers read aloud by a moderator. But most of us will be in a lobby at some point, or a restaurant, or a reception with white tablecloths and a cash bar. And someone nearby will say something that lands wrong, and the room will go still, and there will be a moment, small, fast, easy to miss, where we choose." Evelyn didn't need anyone to defend her. She was more than capable of holding her ground, but Philippa didn't file that report for Evelyn. She filed it because of what it meant about the kind of room she was willing to sit in. What would you have done? I'm asking honestly, not to judge, not to test, because I think most of us want to be Philippa, and most of us are quietly wondering if, when the moment came, we would be. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story made you stop and think, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Not because the story is mine, because it belongs to everyone who has ever been one of the 12 and is tired of it. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.